My name is Linda Fisher. I am the Director of Client and Community Relations at Newfield Network. I probably have spoken to many of you or emailed answering your questions about Newfield Network, personal development, and certified coach training school. So our desire today is to support you in understanding more about us and hearing from the grads and their experience having attended our course. So as we begin today, I want to welcome Carl Godlove, Samir Dua, and Adam Bergeron to our call. Let's start with Carl. Carl, would you be telling our participants today a little bit about yourself and what brings you to this call today?
Sure, happy to. Thank you, Linda. So I am a professional coach, a graduate of 2016 from Newfield. I'm an executive leadership coach. I work with individuals. I work in public companies, founders, entrepreneurs. Been doing this full time from the time I enrolled in March of that year. So I came from about 20 years prior as a CEO of a private family-owned business and the tech world prior to that. So I'm applying it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Samir, would you like to introduce yourself and where you're from?
Yeah, thank you for having me on this call. I am speaking to all of you now from India. I did the Newfield Network program, was it 2013, I think. I ran a business school for 21 years, sold that in 2012. 2013, I registered for the Newfield Network program, and that was the start of my coaching career. From that time onwards, I set up in partnership with the Institute for Generative Leadership in the US. I set up the Institute in India. It's been about 5 years now, 4.5 years since I've been running the Institute for Generative Leadership, full-time leadership coach, consultant as well. And I'm using all the distinctions that I learned at Newfield Network. And I'm waiting to tell you the impact that it's had in my personal and in my professional life. But that's my initial background.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Adam.
My name's Adam Bergeron. I'm a 2015 graduate of Newfield. When I entered the program, I was a full-time attorney and had been practicing law for over a decade at that point. Since then, I have been basically sort of weaning myself off of the lawyer path and more into the coach path. And most recently, my wife and I, who is a psychotherapist, we just opened Bergeron Counseling Center. We're very excited about that as I've been ramping up the coaching and sort of backing off on being an attorney. So for me, it's been a bit of a coming into balance sort of situation, and now sort of having the balance tip in favor of coaching. And Newfield, and again, we can sort of get into what it's meant to me personally, but professionally, it was an amazing launching point and has basically led me to where I am today. And we can talk a little bit more about that once we get into it.
Beautiful. You know, I'm curious. I'm a 2008 graduate of Newfield Network, and I went to work for Newfield in 2011 because I believe this work needs to be in every part of life, personal, professional, school systems, it doesn't matter. So what brought each one of you to Newfield, and what do you think is the value that Newfield has to offer? Who would like to answer and begin?
I can jump in.
Please.
Okay.
Adam?
Yeah, so, you know, what brought me to Newfield was really, I mean, sort of a lifelong desire to work with people interpersonally, work with people in a meaningful fashion, and work with people to essentially, through my own experience with coaching and counseling, to have the same experience that I had, which was to find out, how do you move past your limiting beliefs? How do you begin to see more opportunity available to you in your life? Having lived that in my own life, I was seeking out a program that would essentially allow me to help others with that, and Newfield fit it to a T. And, you know, not that comparisons are always that important, but I didn't find any other coaching program that had what I think is the depth of ability to reach into new perspectives that Newfield provided for me. So that's kind of the lifelong desire to get into this type of work is what led me to Newfield. And then Newfield being in the program enhanced that, I mean, really beyond measure, because it provided a new framework in which I could actually start to see how you can help people change their perspectives and also utilize it in my own life. So it was twofold. It's been helping me professionally develop, and it obviously is the basis for my professional work as a coach.
Thank you very much. Samir or Carl, would you like to jump into that question?
Sure.
Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Thank you.
So my path to Newfield was a direct result of the position I had before coming to the school, which was sitting in the CEO seat. I was part of an organization called Vistage and YPO, but Vistage in particular. And one of the members, it's a group of CEOs that meet every month, and we have resources come in to talk and that sort of thing. And there's a couple things. There was one fellow there that said he had a coach and said it was the best thing that he ever did. And I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm on both coasts, but I live in Pennsylvania mostly. And so I thought his coach was in Chicago for some reason. I have no idea why. So I didn't pursue it any further. But at some point, when in the last year of my tenure in my position, I went to see him and I said, tell me about your coach. And it turns out he was within a 20-minute drive of my home. I couldn't believe it. And so I went to see him and sat down with him. And he has been around for a very long time. He is a Newfield coach. And when I sat down, he said, I'm an ontological coach. He had my attention. And he coached me for about a year before I left my previous role. And I enrolled from there. He said, coaching's a calling. That's what he feels. I feel the same way. I mean, there's a huge element of that in service. And as a CEO, honestly, I always said if I had one superpower, it'd be mind reading, because I'd go into meetings, come out of meetings, walk through the halls and goes, what were they thinking? What are they thinking? And, I'd been through so many programs and through all the various, training that I had been, you come away and it's good for about a week and it goes away. So what really establishes permanent change? And that's what I saw. And not just coaching, but more specifically ontological coaching. And I say it all the time. I believe it. And the people I coach believe it. And sometimes when I first start, they're like, I don't get this. What's this about? And then into it, they're like, wow, this is really, really different, because it is, it leads to, if the client does the work, it leads to permanent change and, getting better and having more opportunities available to them. So, it's the mystery of people that unlocked it for me, and what makes them tick, and how you can actually really make a change in your life.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a couple of questions here, and excuse me. I think I'll start with this question from Karen, and then I'll go to Michelle. Karen says she's retired from health coaching training program at Duke Integrative Medicine, and now, after giving a talk on resilience, she coaches many medical trainees and leaders. Most are surgeons, and she wants to know, I'm looking for some further professional development. I'm also a clinical psychologist. Are these courses for me at Newfield? And I'm wondering who would like to answer that. It sounds to me like Karen's has a concern here that maybe one of you could address.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in.
Please.
Sure.
Adam,
so,
thank you.
In terms of, and I think maybe give a little bit of a differentiator. My wife is a psychotherapist and we work together in private practice. I think coaching is something that helps to balance and or supplement if you're a clinical psychologist already, that I think there's a particular perspective from which clinical psychology comes from or psychotherapy comes from. And I see coaching as a complement to that. So if you're looking to expand your practice in a way that is not already covered, let's say, by your clinical psychology background, coaching, and specifically Newfield's ontological coaching, to me, is a very different framework from which to help a client see the world. So, we can get into the details a little bit if anyone has a follow-up question, but I find it is more accessible to the client in terms of how it relates to how you would be in a psychotherapy session. Psychoeducation is an important component of any therapy or coaching, letting the client know, here's what we're working on. Here's some of the neuroscience underlying it, et cetera, giving them a basis for understanding the process. However, I find that the accessibility, when I explain to a client what we're doing with ontological coaching, that it's more easily understood by them. So you don't have to get deep into neuroscience. You don't have to get into anything like that. It is a framework that they can go back to over and over and implement in their lives, because I believe it is very accessible. And once they start to see it implemented in their lives, they start to see real change. So I think that's a little bit of a differentiator, but that might sort of, show you that coaching does have something to offer in addition to clinical psychology.
Let me just mention that Karen added to her question. She said, I did the Duke Integrative Medical Health Coaching Training, then taught in that program. So have some coaching background, looking for courses to further that health coaching background. So if there's anyone who would like to speak also, again, I'm to Karen's question and her concern about, will this complement her education currently? And she said she's heard great things about Newfield.
Shall I?
Yes, sure, Samir, please jump in.
Yeah. So Karen, thanks for your questions and for the additional question that you just asked right now. And I'll tell you my personal feedback on this. When I ran a business school for 21 years, and I had to sell out after 21 years. And I wanted to go out and look for a coach training institution. And I did massive research internationally. So I wasn't restricted to the United States alone. I lived in India then, I live in India now. And for me, the world was a place I could go to. And I looked up Newfield in Australia, which was completely different. I looked up Newfield in the US, and I looked at institutions in the UK. And I zeroed in on Newfield for some specific reasons. One, of course, amongst other things, was Julio's reputation. Two, I'd spoken to a bunch of students, and I loved it. And three, I was greatly impressed with ontological coaching, and I wanted to go deeper in ontological coaching, and which is where I'm addressing your question. So while you have, I noticed a health coaching background, and I don't know if that is ontological or not, but given your clinical psychology background, an ontological coaching program will really add to your repertoire of how you're going to work with your coachees. It's going to immensely add to your background and repertoire in terms of how you could serve your coachees better. That's been my assessment as far as the whole ontological piece is concerned. It's the study of the beingness, and the view that I take is who you be determines what you do, and what you do determines what you have in terms of results. And I find that extremely powerful. And when you start to play with the beingness, you open new domains of learning, and new domains of action, and new domains of seeing. So that's my two-bit to respond to your question.
Thank you very much. Carl, do you have anything you wanted to say on that? Not that you have to.
Yeah, no, just briefly. There's no doubt in my mind there are many Newfield graduates who come from that kind of background. There are two in my class that are very dear friends of mine. One's an LCSW with a lot of experience with PTSD, and she has integrated the coaching into what she does. It's beautiful how you really get immersed in the program as you learn ontological coaching, and you get really focused on what it's about. And then when you come back out the other end, you bring who you are and all of your other background with it, and integrate it into your unique style, which you bring to the world, and how you address what you address. And I know in both cases, the other one is a psychotherapist who actually took it and then actually applied it out of private practice in the corporate world, and brought that with him. So, and that's just two examples, but I know, and I've seen it myself, how people take this in those very strong disciplines of psychotherapy and so on, and bring it in very, very effectively. Honestly, I'm no expert. I fell into Newfield. I'm glad I did, as opposed to tons of research, but I know folks have taken it and applied it, enormously in those areas.
And something that comes up for me as you all speak, we talk about coaching, and the definition of coaching to me is not broad enough for what we learn in ontological coaching and learning. Truly what I think it is learning how to be a powerful leader in whatever domain it is that our profession is in. And so as I listen to you, that each one of you, that's what comes up for me to answer you, Karen. What has been spoken is how we then take the distinctions and the models and apply them and integrate them into our current education and background and everything that came before Newfield. So I have another question from Michelle here. She says, I'm curious as to your first steps in establishing your coaching practice/business. If it helps to clarify the question, did you know which coaching path you wanted to follow prior to that? Did you have contacts already set up? And that's from Michelle.
I'm happy to jump in.
Please, Carl.
Yeah. So I did this full time from the very beginning. So I wasn't in a job and so on. And no, I didn't know exactly how I was going to apply it. But because of the way the school is structured in the second half with the art and practice of coaching, you have coachees that you bring together and practice your coaching on. And that just the act of enrolling those coachees gets you started, kick-started into the world of getting your clients. So I've actually, because I have a business background, I do coach, into the business world, but I do individuals as well. I coach millennials. I coach people, privately, and some of it's, pro bono, and some of it isn't. But it's a very broad range. It took me a while, and it still is, to find my voice, if you will. So just being out with conversation, and you definitely figure that out as you go. And I would just say follow your passion of what you would do if you weren't coaching, and then just bring that alongside you. It requires a very long answer to get really deep into it, but you can absolutely get there, and there's a whole lot of support to help make that happen.
Well, let me just mention right here, because we're going to put it up on our chat area, that Newfield also supports you by having ongoing conversations with graduates. Once a month, we have what's called a Learning in Action call. And that is a free call for 1.5 hours where graduates come on a call and they talk about setting up a coaching practice. They talk about ontological distinctions, things that come up in someone's practice as far as issues, but there's lots of topics in there. So I know, Carl, you come on that call, and it is a way that we support grads as they move forward. And I'll leave it at that and see who else wants to answer that question. And we have more coming up now.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of follow up on what Carl had said. I think there are a lot of different paths that everyone that comes in Newfield ends up taking, but I'll preface it by saying that Newfield is very strong in how they support you both during, obviously, the program and then after. I found the alumni relations, the network that you basically graduate into with Newfield, to be really critical in the development of my coaching business. So I'll say that at the outset. But in terms of, everyone comes from a different background. Everyone has different resources. Everyone's at a different place in their life. For me personally, I was fortunate enough to kind of have my law career to a point where I could slowly start to ramp down and still have that work with building my coaching practice. So I know a lot of people, as Carl, who jumped right into it from day one. And again, the Newfield network there is invaluable, and the network you build while you're training as to be a coach is invaluable. Other people sort of do a half and half, where sort of what I've done, which is build up the coaching organically until you can basically flip over and do it full time. Other people integrate Newfield into existing work, or even just into the business world or their current professions. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. And it's all contextual upon where you are and what sort of resources you have backing you up at that point in time. But one thing I'm very confident about is that worldwide and in the United States, there is a pressing need for people who can work with people to help them see past their problems, to help them see past their limiting perspectives, because we have various mental health epidemics that are going on throughout the world and in this country right now. And coaching, I see, is a critical part to serving that population and serving that general trajectory we are on as a society. So I do not see any shortage of work for coaches, but you do sort of have to stage it out in the way that's going to make the most sense for your life.
Thank you so much, Adam. Great. I have another question here. So Michelle said thank you. She was the one that asked that last question. I have Kate here. She says, I'm former ED education. She says, I'm a former ED coming from the nonprofit sector, working with primarily women and young people. I'm curious how Newfield supports working with a diverse range of clients by age, race, gender, ethnicity. I'm particularly interested in how Newfield's training can help coaches tailor coaching to clients that differ by gender, generation, and class. It's a beautiful question, especially in this day and age.
I'll be brief, but
Carl?
yeah, certainly. You know, that was one of the most profound things about the training, the immersion. You know, particularly the week at the front end of the foundations course, the cultural discourse and an appreciation for what that looks like in that room was phenomenal. So you don't just learn it, you really are immersed experientially in it while you're there. I mean, it feels like 24/7 for a week, you know, when you're there immersed in it. And it's, do you come away with an understanding, appreciation for that? And there is no doubt, and more than intellectual as well. So how you apply that, you know, to your own circumstance, I don't know, but I do know when you leave that experience, you've lived it, and you can certainly bring it, you know, to your world.
Thank you. Samir?
Yeah.
Do you have anything you'd like to speak to?
Sure, yeah. I come from India, like I said earlier. I have found the fundamentals of the foundations program, exactly what Carl just stated, extremely powerful. Not only within the immersive experience there, once you have gone through that experience, been through the 4-month practice after the foundations, even before you start the coach training, an extremely powerful process of embodiment of the fundamental distinctions of Newfield Network. And once you get those fundamental distinctions of Newfield Network, you could adapt those for gender, generation, class, and all other kinds of, you know, diversity, including age, race, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. It's once you get the foundational piece, it's incredibly valuable to take it all out, irrespective of you know, who your audience is going to be. That's what my learning has been here. You know, we are doing a lot of women empowerment work in India. In the work that I'm doing a lot of work with NGOs here, NGOs which are working with the differently abled. I run an NGO which is with organ donations. I'm interacting. I'm using this work across different audiences. So, you know, your question on will this help? Immensely, yes.
Well, thank you, Samir, because what comes up for me is, let's talk about one of our models, right? The first model we learn is, it's called the OAR model, Observer Action Result, OAR. And so when we're talking about diversity, what we're learning about is how do we observe any person, place, or thing at this moment tells us how we're taking action and how we're getting a result. Would anybody like to speak to that based on the question that was spoken and given it a little context using one of our models?
Sure. Yeah. I'd be happy to jump in on that.
We'll get you in a minute, Samir. You can come
Oh,
next.
I apologize,
Sure.
Samir.
No,
That's all
no,
right.
no.
So, I
Right.
mean, sort of to follow on to what Samir was saying and to what Linda was saying. So that's exactly right. Ontology, the study of being. So how are we being in this world dictates how we observe this world. How we observe the world shows the range of perceived possibilities and actions in front of us. That's essentially, and then those actions lead to the actual results in our world. That might sound a little bit simple, but the idea is that you take the person from where they are, what in their world, what in their way of being defines their realm of what they see. And actually, Julio said something really beautiful. I went to a talk he gave a couple months ago. And so when I say taking someone from where they are, Julio had this beautiful sort of add-on, which is looking and perceiving your client with reverence. So it's not just understanding and helping them understand their own positionality in the world. And of course, none of us can be in the shoes of someone who, depending on, gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, we can't pretend to inherit their observer for them, but we can help them see their observer and how that is affecting what's available to them. And what I love about what Julio said is we can help them see it and we can show reverence for the observer that they are. And that is an incredibly validating way to help someone start to open up themselves and their own view of their own perspectives. So it's not that, the training itself gives you the idea of what it's like to live in their shoes. Of course not. It's that it opens up your ability to show reverence and care and acceptance for their perspective, and then watch their perspective blossom.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
I just like to say.
Oh, Carl.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it's really quick, which is I've yet to have a client who hasn't said at some point and fairly early on that, Carl, I've never said this to anybody. I have never spoken this out loud to my spouse, to my parents, to my dog. And, that can't happen. That cannot happen unless you become exactly the way Adam just mentioned, with reverence to that person. And that is so embodied in ontological coaching. It gives me goosebumps even talking about it. So that's my brief comment.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Carl. Samir, please jump in here.
Yes, of course. While Adam and Carl have done great justice to this question, let me throw in my 2 bits on it. The model that you speak about, Linda, is profound, and it's not, whatever we speak about is not enough. The observers that we are of who we are, the observers that we are of who the other is, the observers that we are of the environment, of the challenges, of the possibilities, of everything is determining what actions we take and hence what results we generate. And when we shift the observer of who we are, of who the other is, of the challenges, of the environment, of the possibilities, of everything around us, it opens up a whole new domain of action and a whole new domain of results, which up until then was not even available in the scope of thinking. And which is why this model becomes really powerful, not only for the coachee. It's important that I stress out here really loudly, I have been the biggest beneficiary of the work that I do as a coach and as somebody who's gone through a coach training program. My wife had walked out on me, my company had gone bust and I had to sell out another company. I was down in the dumps, and all of these distinctions have helped me pull myself up and hence give myself authority to coach other people. And the key piece here has been in observing myself and my challenges differently, and hence taking different actions, and hence generating different results. So that's something that I want to sort of, and how much ever I speak about this, it's not going to be enough because it's so profound, like I said.
Samir, that is exactly the question I was going to go to next, is how has this supported you personally? Because so often in our a society, we talk about a career and what we're going to learn to give it out to the world rather than what it does for us personally. And for me, I can say everything that I am today is a result of the last 10 years. I mean, I know, Samir, you've written some books and you're doing many things. Can you speak a little bit more to the personal shift that it supported you in? You mentioned that at the time coming in the course, you know, wife and you had separated, your business had gone bust, and you were really down. Where are you today as a result of this work?
So my wife had walked out on me. It took me 20 months to bring her back home. And what brought the shift in my wife beginning to trust me again, and not that we had, you know, it just that, you know, we dated for 6 years, we were married for 9 years, and then she said she'd had enough of me, and she'd walked out. The big shift was in the way I created myself and I created her. I had to drop some fundamental assessments that I held about my wife and about myself, because I discovered those fundamental assessments were nothing but that, assessments. They had no fact in it, they had no grain of truth in it, but I had sort of embraced those assessments as if they were the gospel. So for me to discover that these assessments weren't facts, they were my creation, and that I'm holding them really tight, and that's my way of comforting myself. And yet, as much as they were comforting myself, they weren't giving me my result of getting my wife and my daughter back home. So, you know, back then, it was a challenge to let that go, because letting that go was taking a whole new level of ownership. But that's what the program taught me, right? You know, you've got to choose what you want. Either you're going to be committed to your result, or you're going to be committed to your assessments. And sometimes these aren't necessarily in coherence. So you got to choose, and you know that's the choice I had to make. So that's on the one hand, as far as my personal life is concerned. Where am I on that? My wife's back home. My daughter's back home. It's been 4 years since they've been back home. We have twins now. We've added to our family, so we have 3 kids now. My wife, about a few months ago, said, "Samir, it's never been so good with you before." And I've known her for 21 years now, and she acknowledges that, you know, it's never been as good as it's been now, because there's a whole new way of looking at her, and there's a whole new way of looking at myself. In the personal domain, in the work domain, you know, when I began my career, after selling out my institutions, I was down in the dumps. I financially broke. I had gone bust. My name was not very good, and I had to restart again. It took me a year and a half to get my feet going. But you know, the one thing that I did, and I want to say this out here, is when I was starting out my my coaching offers, I productized my coaching offers rather than just going with a coaching offer. I created certain products, and I went to companies cold calling. Most of them were cold calling with certain products, and it took some time to build trust. I did a lot of pro bono work initially to build trust. I don't do any pro bono work now unless if it's for a not-for-profit. Now my time is packed with for-profit work, but for the not-for-profit, I would do some amount of work. But initially, I did a lot of pro bono work to build credibility.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else want to speak to their personal, how it's enhanced your personal life as well as your professional?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Oh, please go.
No, I'm happy to do that. Yeah. So I wrote a couple things down as I pondered that question. And the first word that came was peace. The second word that came was patience. And the third was being kind to self. And, you know, so I have almost a 40-year work history, so been around a while. And the last 20 was in the role I've already described. But when you're in that role, you're on stage every day. And I have such a deep sense of wanting to be me, and really felt like I couldn't do that. And that was probably the biggest shift. Well, no, without a doubt, that was absolutely the biggest shift for me. that I can just be myself, explore what that is, and bring that forward. And, you have to be an extraordinary observer and have help doing that. So the beautiful thing is you have coaching. I had a coach, but you also have coaching through the program. And that transition took about a year before I could really shed the ought to, should, persona, all those things to get down to who I really truly am. And that has been the most soul-saving process for me. And, I had a very difficult time the last year I was in my seat, and it was difficult on the way out. So, I was starting in a place that of lack of comfort for sure. So it's been profound, had, that kind of profound impact on my life. I wouldn't trade any of it for anything. Yeah.
I want to ask a quick question. Often I hear from individuals that I'm speaking to about, how do you integrate coaching school while working full time? And, some of you on this call had talked about not at the time working, but having, looking for your next career. But how many hours a week do you think a person, we often say 5 to 7 hours a week if you put that in. What do you think about how much time it takes while being in the program to be successful at a coaching school like ours?
Yeah, I can address that because I was working full-time as an attorney the whole time I was doing the training, and I continued to work full-time as an attorney at the first, basically about the first year as I built my coaching practice. So I think 5 to 7 hours is actually very realistic to get out of the program what you want to and need to get out of the program, and also recognizing that if you're working full-time, that's another 5 to 7 hours a week on top of family and all the other obligations that we have in life. However, what I found was that those 5 to 7 hours weren't a burden. They felt like a resource to me. And they felt like, sort of to echo what Carl was saying about the personal effect on his life, I found a lot of resource and a lot of energy coming from my work in the training program itself, because it was both acting on me as I was learning how to use it use it with others. So I was beginning to see my observers. I was beginning to see the ways I limit my own potential in the world, even while I'm working a full-time job as an attorney. So I'm actually feeling more expansive, even though I technically have less hours in the week. So again, like, I think that speaks to the power of the work, because as you're doing it, you're living it, you're embodying it, and you're watching your own life change. And then it's also was giving me a lot of hope, because like Carl said, I never felt very authentic as an attorney. Not that there aren't authentic attorneys or there's anything wrong with being an attorney, but it is something that we all wear masks in life, and it takes a while for you to crack those open. But the work I was doing in Newfield was cracking those open and allowing me to be actually more relaxed at work, still getting more done in terms of dealing or working with the Newfield training, and also watching everything sort of expand for me as I'm actually getting busier. So it's a little counterintuitive, but I found that the work itself actually felt freeing and more spacious once I got into it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Adam. Believe it or not, we're coming up on the time that we allotted for this Q&A webinar today, and I want to take a few moments with those who are participants on the call to tell more about Newfield and what we have to offer. But I especially want to thank Carl, Samir, and Adam. There is, for me, being in this world and knowing that you all are in it makes my world a better place.
Thank you,
three
Linda.
of you, really.
Having
Having known you, and the rest of the individuals that I have an opportunity to know, that we're out there in the world making a difference. So thank you so much. I just want to say to those who are on the call today, there's many ways, as was mentioned, for a graduate to tune in to our community. Community is so important. And so the alumni community has the LIA call, the Learning in Action call, once a month. It's free. We have podcasts and blogs, and we invite alumni to participate by sending in something for a blog or a podcast with us. We also have opportunities. Let's see, our alumni committee board that is very active and speaking on the behalf of our alumni. We have an alumni directory so that if you're a graduate of the course, you can find a Newfield alumni in any part of the world. We are an international company. So for the question about the diversity of the programs, this program that started in March, we had 9 countries present. So that was, it happens that way each course. There's usually between 7 to 10 countries present at each course. And so there's the alumni directory, there's the coaching directory. So once you've graduated and you're an alumni of Newfield and you have a coaching business, we put you on our coaching directory, and you can be found in your area, or somebody can find you with your expertise through an online directory that we started this year. So I want to thank you all again, Carl and Samir and Adam, for your time. I know you gave it freely, and for the participants on the call today, it's been my pleasure. Again, I'm Linda Fisher I'm the Director of Client and Community Relations. And if I can answer any additional questions for you, I'm available through email, and we can set up a phone time. Also, this call today will be recorded, and we will be sending it out to you. So thank you very much. And in the background, we have Kelly. Kelly, thank you for your technical support today. Bye.